Hello everyone, and welcome to my first video. So for today's video I'm going to talk about the Roman army and provide you an example of a typical battle of the Republican Legion. Now the Republican Legion was the standard legion used during the Roman Republic before the advent of the Empire. Now one thing about the Manipular Legion that people should be aware of is that unlike the traditional legionary that people think of, there was much more diversification within the structure of the Legion at this point as opposed to the Imperial Legions of later centuries. So to begin with, I want to discuss the unit types that made up this early Legion. So the first type of soldier in this Legion were the Velates. Now Velates were the light infantry and the skirmishers. Their job was to screen the army, perform reconnaissance, and engage the enemy line and wither the front lines with volleys after volleys of javelins. And then once contact has been made, they will retreat behind the heavy infantry and form a fourth line, and from there they can be deployed where needed, depending on how the course of the battle would develop. Now these were usually the most inexperienced, youngest, or the poorest soldiers of the Legion, as they could afford the least amount of equipment. The second line and the first line of heavy infantry were the Hastati. The Hastati were the youngest men in the Roman Legion, besides the Velates, and they were also the least equipped of the heavy infantry. Now, this being said, they still were well equipped by the standard of the time with the scutum shield here, a heart protector, bronze cuirass, or chainmail called lorica hamada that protected the torso, and they would also be equipped with either one greave or no greaves, depending on what they could afford. And they were armed with the famous gladius hispaniensis, the Roman short sword. These soldiers were the first line of heavy infantry to engage the enemy, and depending on who they would fight, they could be the ones that would break them, or they would then retreat if more soldiers were required on the second line. Once the Hastati had retreated, the enemy would then face the second line of heavy infantry, which were the Principes. The Principes were the more experienced and wealthier soldiers that could afford better equipment and had more combat experience under their belt. As you can see, these soldiers are better equipped. They are all wearing lorica hamada, which is another term for chainmail, which was a Celtic invention that the Romans copied. And as you will see, the Romans were so successful because they copied so many technologies they encountered from both their trade partners and their opponents. And that's why they were so successful, and in almost every conflict they would come out victorious. Now, the final line of infantry in the Manipular Legion are the Triarii. The Triarii are the most experienced and veteran soldiers in the Legion, and they are also the wealthiest, as they can afford the best equipment. But unlike the first two lines of heavy infantry, they are armed with a hasta thrusting spear. And it is said it has come down to the Triarii. That means the Triarii will make or break the battle. If the Triarii cannot beat the enemy, the battle will be lost at this point. The last units are called the Roman Calvary, or at the time they were called Equites, which Equites are a class of Roman, and these are made up of the nobility, senators, and patricians, the elite in Roman society. Now, Roman cavalry was always subpar compared to their infantry, as they placed most of their emphasis in their heavy infantry. But, regardless to say, their cavalry could still be very effective, although when fighting the Carthaginians under Hannibal or other opponents, their cavalry was certainly second tier compared to the enemy, and at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, the weakness of Roman cavalry was one of the reasons why the Romans lost that battle. Now, let's look at the formation that the Romans are in here. This is called a Triplex Aqueous formation, because you have three lines of heavy infantry with the Velates screen. This allows flexibility, so forces can move to the left, to the right, they can pivot, they can rotate. It's a very flexible formation that can be moved forward, and it can pivot to adjust to any threats the enemy places on the line. And the one thing is, you have an equal number of Hastati and Principes, and then you have half the number of Triarii. Now, the enemy we're facing today are the Averni, which are at that time from a place called Gaul, which is today modern-day France. As So without further ado, let's get this battle on the go and see what happens. So one thing what I have done here is I put my Velates on skirmish mode, so they will not go into melee combat with the enemy. And we're going to move them out a little further to try to give them more time to fire before they make contact with our heavy infantry. The enemy looks like they're moving more to our right, their left. Now, the terrain here. The hill here is forming my right flank, and depending on where they attack or they concentrate their attack, I will then be able to assess where I can hit them harder, and my eventual goal will be to turn one of their flanks or break through at one point to threaten any sector of their army. Alrighty, so now we are seeing they are advancing. It looks like they're going to try to hit my right flank very hard. So with that being said, I'm going to move one unit of Principes up the hill here.
Orders!
I'm going to move another unit of Principes from the left over here to support the right.
Triarii!
And I'm also going to move one more unit of Triarii over here, as opposed to reinforce the right. Now they're pivoting again, so they're still focusing a little more on our right, their left, but they've taken more of a central position on the battlefield as opposed to my line. Since we do have a slight cavalry advantage, I'm going to move our left-wing cavalry out to see if we can knock out their cavalry ahead of the main battle to prevent any threats to our flank and rear. And they are taking the bait, so my cavalry is going to charge. We're going to have a cavalry fight here on the flank. And they've been hit. They are already taking heavy losses, where we've taken a few losses. And here they come. Our Velates just fired some volleys, and they are retreating. And as you can see, they've done some damage to
our general is under attack.
Their skirmishers are firing at us. Our soldiers are Aqueous, and they're making contact with the front line of this dozen.
Jupiter, get us strength!
Our general is under attack on the right, so we're going to move our cavalry as they've routed their cavalry on the left to reinforce our general.
Principes! Let's engage!
Move our Principes up to attack them.
Triarii!
Move our
Quick
Triarii.
Quick
The soldiers here. Let's move our Principes in.
Sons of Mars! Melee troops awaiting orders. At speed! Yours to command. Double time! Principes!
Move our Principes up, starting to break through here in the center of the blitz.
At the double!
We have, looks like, driven their cavalry off.
Brave Romans to a man! At speed!
And our cavalry is going to hit them.
Principes!
That should be enough to defeat their cavalry, and our Principes are going to hit down the flank. Now, let's hope we can turn their left flank. Line is holding thus far. Alright.
One of our units has used all its ammunition.
And we have now gained cavalry superiority. We're going to take our cavalry and hit their skirmishers to prevent them from whittling down our units with missile fire.
Triarii!
Move our Triarii
At speed!
One of our units has used all its ammunition.
On the right.
Principes! Advance at speed!
And pivot our forces to hit them from the side.
Melee troops! March! Order them!
While our center and left are holding them in place, allowing our skirmishers, our Velates, to try to take puck shots at them as they can.
One of our units has used all its ammunition.
For glory! Melee horsemen!
Pull our cavalry back, and the heavy infantry to do their jobs. We have broken them. Their left has collapsed.
One of our units has used all its ammunition.
So now we're going to pivot our forces to
Principes!
hit them.
Commander! Sons of Mars! At your service! At speed!
One of our units has used all its ammunition.
Velates! Melee infantry ready! Principes! Ready and waiting! Orders! Jupiter gives us strength! Engage! Orders!
Our men flee the field of battle. This is a shameful display.
Principes! Advance at speed!
We've also one here on the right.
Advance at speed!
Or our left, my apologies. In the heat of battle, it's hard to
The
tell
battle is
sometimes.
turning in our favor.
With that, we're
At the double!
starting to take the advantage here.
Advance! Your orders! To engage! Triarii! Principes! Triarii!
One of our units has used all its ammunition.
Brave Romans to a man!
And they are starting to break up. Their formations have been completely disrupted, and we're now getting behind them on the flanks.
Spearmen ready for orders!
And our last reserve, the Triarii, into the fray, and they're starting to break.
Principes! Engage! Ready!
Our men flee the field of battle.
Move our
This is a
cavalry
shameful
up. We do
display.
not want them to get engaged with enemy spear units.
Melee troops
That's
awaiting
a
orders!
perfect way to
Ready
kill
for
off
duty.
your cavalry.
Ready and waiting!
And they just broke in here on our left.
One of our
General
units has used all its
still
ammunition.
holding out here.
Principes!
So we're going to move some of our remaining troops over here to support the fight. Triplex and Triarii engaged in general. We're starting to waver. And then at this point, I'm going to have my cavalry run down the enemy. So with that, the enemy army has routed. And at this point, you have a choice of either letting them go, or you can try to run down as many as possible. I know it sounds quite bloody, but you want to try to kill or capture as many of the enemy as possible once you've broken them, to reduce the number that can fight another day. And you can also ransom, or you can do whatever you want with the prisoners. So, and that's more specifically with the game Rome 2, but historically speaking, it was always best to try to remove as many of your enemies from the field as possible once they've broken, because once their cohesion has been shattered, that is the time where you can destroy or completely annihilate an enemy army. So we're going to go ahead and continue.
Triarii!
Cavalry, and this is when I have my Velates pursue. As light infantry, they can cover more ground more quickly, and they do not have the burden of so much heavy armor.
The enemy general is dead.
And with that, we've removed our leader from the fight. There's a few left. What's going on here? There's our general. Need some routing spirit. They're going to speed it up, as at this point we've already won. It's just a matter of how many enemy can escape versus how many cannot. We re-examine the front line. We can tell it's been a pretty bloody battle. And I know this is a game, but when thinking about what it must have really been like to be in one of these battles with melee combat being the primary method of warfare, it's hard to imagine. Putting it politely. And looking at the statistics of our units, our Velates have taken very few losses as they were able to escape most of the melee fighting, while our Stadi have taken some heavy losses, Principes moderate, and then the Triarii have also taken some losses, but it's more confined to several of the units that were engaged the longest in the fighting, particularly on our right flank where they focused their attack. Speed it up again as their forces have almost vacated the field. Here's one of our Stadi units that have taken more than 75% casualties, which is very high, as opposed to unit Principes. So, looking at statistics, so we deployed 2,060 men, we took 722 losses, while the Averni deployed 2,180, and they've taken 1,829 losses. So they've lost well over twice as many men as we have, and comparatively, while our army has suffered, it is still combat effective if it was to go into the field again, whereas their army is now combat ineffective as many units have been destroyed and others are down to such low strength they can no longer form a coherent fighting force. So I hope you all enjoyed the video today. I'm planning to do more on classical warfare and historical topics. So please let me know if you have any questions, thoughts. Please leave me likes, suggestions, and we'll see you on the next video.